In this video, we are going to learn about PHP's authentication variables, means the variables that we use in order to implement authentication. So that we are going to learn in this video. In the previous video, we just saw the introduction to HTTP's authentication concepts. There we learned what is authentication and why it is so important. Okay, so let's now learn how to implement authentication in PHP. PHP uses two predefined variables to authenticate a user. Okay, so we have two predefined variables. The first is $_server, and inside the quotes I have written PHP_auth_user, and another variable $_server, and inside the quotes I have written PHP_auth_password. Now this variable will hold the username and this variable will hold the password. Now you might be thinking that these two variables look similar, but a variable can hold one value at a time. But even we have learned about arrays, right? Arrays are the special variables that can hold more than one value at the time. Okay, so the server is an associative array. Okay, associative array means the data will be stored in the form of key. I'll just write here key and value. We have value. So this is the key PHP_auth_user, and the value will be the value that user has entered. Okay, so whatever user will enter, that will be considered as the value. So username will be stored here and password will be stored here. Okay, these variables store the username and password values. While authenticating is as simple as comparing expected username and password to these variables, there are two important caveats to keep in mind when using these two predefined variables. So there are two important things that we need to keep in mind when using these predefined variables. So let's see what are these two things. First is, both variables must be verified at the start of every restricted page. You can easily accomplish this by authenticating the user prior to performing any action on the restricted page. So why we do this, why we use these variables at the start of the page, that's because whether user is authenticated or not, and depending on that, user can perform whatever action that he or she wants to perform on the restricted page. So whenever I'm creating any restricted page, so at the start I need to verify these two variables, which typically means placing the authentication code in a separate file and then including that file in the restricted page using the require function. Now this is very important, this line. See, let's say if I have 10 restricted pages. So in that case, I have to write that authentication code 10 times, okay, in every file. But that is not the effective way in which how we write the code. It is an inefficient method because I'm repeating the same lines of code again and again. I know we are using them in different files, but still. So in that case, what we can do is we can place that authentication code inside a separate file, and then we can simply include that file wherever we want in any restricted page. So what I'm doing is I'm not repeating the same lines of code again and again. Instead, I just wrote the authentication code in a separate file, and now I'm just including that. We make use of this require function in order to include that file. Okay, so this is this is an effective way. Okay, determining if a variable is set with isSet. Okay, the isSet function determines whether the variable has a value or not. So if a variable is holding any value, now here it is very important to note any value, either right or a wrong value, it doesn't matter. But if it is holding any value, this function will return us true. And if it is not holding any value, it will return us false. So this is an inbuilt function in PHP called isSet. Okay. It returns true if the variable contains a value and false if it does not. As supplied to user authentication, the isSet function is useful for determining whether these two variables are set or not. So we can make use of this isSet function in order to check whether the user has entered any value or not. And that can be checked by isSet function. Means if these variables are holding any value, that means the user has entered some value, and then we can validate that data that user has entered in order to check whether the data is valid or invalid. Okay, so we will be using this function. Okay, now let's see the code. Okay, this is the code for authentication in PHP. Okay, first what I'm doing is I'm basically saying if username or password is not set, display the authentication window. So if the username and password is not set, then we will just pop up the authentication window. So this is the code for that. What I'm saying is if not is set means if these two variables are not set, then you can run the code. If any of these two variables, see I have made use of the operator or means if any of the two variables is not set, then run this code. Okay, so I'm just saying if not is set dollar underscore server, and we just pass the variable name inside the is set function, and even here I have passed the password, okay, for password, and this is for user. So here I have made use of the header function. Now header function is used to redirect to any other web page. Okay, whenever let's say okay, I will give you a very interesting example. Let's say I'm entering my username and password on Facebook. As soon as I click on login, I will be redirected to my web page, to my Facebook homepage, right? So as soon as I click on login, it will be redirected only if the username and password are correct. Okay, this is the condition. If both username and password are correct, then I will be redirected. So that is implemented using header function. Okay, we make use of this header function, and even for pop-ups and everything we make use of this function. Okay, so what I'm saying is I have written some strings inside this function. Okay, and you have to write these strings as it is in order to implement that authentication window. If you write these two functions, then that window will be popped up, otherwise it won't be popped up. So basically this. So if these variables are not set, then run this code. But let's say if the variables are set, if they are holding some value, then I can simply echo out. Echo out username and password. And here I have made use of this curly braces. Okay. Why? This is the part of the syntax. But even if you don't want to follow this approach, let's say if you don't want to write the curly braces, instead you want to go for concatenation. Okay, concatenating string with a variable, we have already learned that. So even you can implement that functionality if you want. Okay, it as I always say, we can write a code in multiple ways. Okay, there are multiple ways to write a same code. Okay, so let's run this. Okay, I will just go to my IDE. Okay, so here let's write this code. So I'll just say PHP, and here I will just say if not is set, and here variable name is dollar underscore server PHP underscore auth underscore user, or not is set dollar underscore server, and here I will say PHP underscore auth underscore PW. I'll just use header function, and inside the single quotes I will write www hyphen authenticate, then hyphen basic. Okay, it should be in caps, and is equal to authentication. Okay, and now one more header function, and here I will just say http slash 1.1 401 unauthorized. Okay, so this is the way you can implement that pop-up window. Okay, so we will just execute. Okay, but first let's complete. Else I will just echo out username and password. Your username is $_ PHP underscore auth underscore user, and I'll just break the line. And if you don't want to write in this way, we will just go for our old approach. Your password is, and we will just concatenate $_ server PHP underscore auth underscore password, and I will just again concatenate to break the line. Okay, so you can go for either of the approach, it doesn't matter. As I always say, there are multiple ways to write a same code. Okay, so now everything looks perfect. Now I will just go to my browser and let's run this. Okay, so I will just go to that location, localhost slash programming slash file name is first dot php. Okay, there are some problems. There might be some problems in the code. Let's see. Okay, here it should not be an hyphen. Here it should be colon. Okay, just after the word authenticate, we have to put a colon. Okay, now it will work. I will just save it and let's reload this. Okay, so as you can see, an authentication window has popped up. So you can implement that functionality using the code that we just wrote. So I'll just write here Kevin and Kevin. So then it will be printed. Let's see. Your username is Kevin and your password is Kevin. Okay. So this is the way you can achieve this authentication functionality. Okay. And this is the code for it. This is the code for the pop-up. And here I'm just echoing out. Okay. So this is all about authentication in PHP. Thank you.